NFL news of the day, another firing for the New York Jets. What it means that GM Joe Douglas is out. Mix in some mixin' with the beatdown. Texans on track. Cowboys buried under the track right now. And as raucous a celebration as we've seen for the Rookie of the Year. Take
What does this honor mean to you right now?
This is cool.
Paul Skeens is chalant is not. Let's go around the horn.
Party animal.
Should be
That's
doing
usually
backflips.
what I say when I do a show with Ayatollah.
At least one of them should do backflips.
It's cool.
You would do backflips too.
We start with news of the day from the NFL. The Jets firing general manager Joe Douglas. Kaboom. So head coach and GM now gone, not even Thanksgiving yet. Last week, Aaron Rodgers said his intention was to play in 2025. With each loss and people losing jobs, the fog is getting thicker and the Jets are getting grounded. Around the horn in New York and Frank Isola on the Douglas firing and what it means going forward for the New York Jets.
Yeah, Tony, the Jets are an MESS, and they've been that way for a long time. And Joe Douglas, it looked like he was going to be out. I mean, they are 34 games under 500 since he took over in 2019. The timing of it is a little odd. But, you know, when you're an organization that thinks we'll solve things by firing our head coach, we'll bring in the quarterback's friend who's a wide receiver as if that position changes things, and now we'll get rid of the GM. Let's face it. Does it all go back to Aaron Rodgers blowing out his Achilles? Maybe. Does it go back to even acquiring Aaron Rodgers? Maybe so. You know, they turned the keys to the franchise over to this quarterback, and I'm not blaming him for last week. They should have won the game. That's on the defense. But let's face it, Aaron Rodgers has to take a lot of accountability here. This thing has been an absolute disaster.
Justin Tinsley.
This is a cataclysmic failure from a franchise who has multiple TED Talks on cataclysmic failure. The Jets are quite literally that team or that guy that gets behind the car with no GPS, and where you ask him where you're going, he just says, I don't know, I'll figure it out, or maybe I won't. Well, clearly they have not figured it out. And yes, a big bulk of the blame or a big bulk of the talk will go to Aaron Rodgers. 33 consecutive games without 300 yards passing. Career lows with the Jets in yards per attempt and passer rating. But here's the thing that really hurts. They're tied to him in that contract through the end of the decade because of the voided years. And so when you look at this season, why it is the collapse that it is, it's because they were supposed to contend with the Bills this year for AFC East supremacy. They had talent on both sides of the ball, and now guess what? They're back to being the New York Jets. And who the hell wants to go there?
Courtney Cronin around the horn of you.
Aaron Rodgers is going to be the scapegoat here, and dare I say that. I don't mean that in like a flippant term because recency, him getting Robert Saleh fired, him getting Joe Douglas fired. But let's go back to 2019. Joe Douglas had 5.5 years to see this plan through. We were told, let's just get the defense fixed. That'll take us to the next level. And then let's just nail the draft class. That'll get us the right roster. And then get the quarterback. That'll take us over the top. And when you take a look at Joe Douglas's tenure with the New York Jets, it's going to be defined by the fact that they could never do the last part. They had the lowest total QBR, lowest completion rate, and lowest yards per attempt since 2019. A lot of general managers around the league get less time to enact their plan. He'll get a job somewhere else. He's a well-respected name around the NFL, but the Jets are still in the same state that they were in before he got hired 5.5 years
I'm sensing,
ago.
yes, it's a mess, it's a disaster, it's a cataclysm, as Tinsley said. George, the question is, what happens now?
What happens now? Who the hell knows, Tony? I mean, I don't know where they go at this point because here's the thing. Joe Douglas, his winning percentage with the Jets, 319 in 5 years. So he may get a job somewhere else because he's well-liked or whatnot, and he's had some hits and some misses. But I don't know if that record warrants another GM opportunity. Now, Aaron Rodgers absolutely deserves some of the blame here in regards to the Robert Saleh stuff. I don't know if he deserves any blame here with Joe Douglas. I guess maybe he hinted that he wanted certain guys. But to me, Tony, the biggest issue here is ownership. This is way bigger than Aaron Rodgers, okay? Look at Woody Johnson's tenure with the Jets and tell me that he's not the biggest problem here, the guy who perhaps meddles in situations. We've seen plenty of those owners in the history of this sport and others, okay? That, to me, is the bigger problem. You are only as good as the top, and the top of this franchise, from a sports perspective, is pretty rancid.
32 jobs, though, Frank, guys. So, give Jets fans something to hold on to here.
Well, I mean, let's face it, the name Bill Belichick certainly.
Oh, here we go.
No way.
Hang on.
Come on.
They need to do something, though. When you look at teams like Pittsburgh and Baltimore, New England, when Belichick was there, why are these teams always successful? Kansas City, the same way. Yes, there's talent there, but there's also a power structure, and there's accountability and checks and balances. You don't have your quarterback not showing up for mini camp because he wants to be in Egypt coming off an Achilles injury, and they're not playing a single down in the preseason. They need someone there to take total control of that organization and build a real culture,
of course,
like they have in those places.
But you just nominated Bill Belichick. Do you think, George, you're shaking your head no, do you think Belichick?
No, wait, why would Belichick want to go to that dumpster fire? Al Groh's not around to take over for him, so no, he's absolutely not going to the Jets.
Al Groh. Woo.
That's
We've been horned, we'll move on. From one dumpster fire to another. The roof caved in on the Cowboys season literally last night. And the stat that it's been 6 straight home games of trailing by 20 plus, that's just brutal. Empty seats at Cowboy Stadium as well. Texans 3-score win. Joe Mixon is a cement mixer when he runs the football, but last night didn't even need the mix on. Wide open lanes. Yards before contact for him. Courtney Cronin around the horn to you, and the number 1 takeaway from Texans 34, Cowboys 10.
Let's start with the dumpster fire part first. The fact is the Cowboys are not getting any better. This is going to be a long 2 months to watch this team, which has as many touchdowns inside AT&T Stadium through 11 weeks as the Detroit Lions do. Let that sink in for a minute. But I look at the Houston Texans, a team that is legitimately in the mix for the playoffs right now in the AFC, and I've got a lot of concerns, Tony, about this offense. Yes, they were able to use Joe Mixon, the offensive line, get things going, but C.J. Stroud's thrown 2 touchdowns in the last 5 games. There was that stretch between about 3 minutes left in the first quarter till the end of the game where the offense was stagnant. They let the Dallas Cowboys kind of sneak back in here, 3 of 11 on 3rd down. I still have questions about the viability of this offense when it looks like Stroud has progressed a little bit, but either way, it's a win that puts them squarely in the mix in the AFC playoffs, which at this point of the season, they need going.
But that's a takeaway there, that a 34-10 win wasn't as 34-10-y as it might look. George Zadato, around the horn to you, a takeaway from last night.
Well, what I would add to that in regards to what Courtney said, Hall of Famer Steve Young has said this before numerous times over the years about guys who had great rookie seasons at the quarterback position and talking about how that sophomore season is way more challenging because now there's film, right? Yeah. Everyone sees your tendencies. Everyone sees what you're capable of, and they're going to try to figure out how to stop that. They've also had some injuries and whatnot. Joe Mixon deserves a lot of credit, though, particularly for what he's been able to accomplish on the road. I mean, you're talking about historic type stuff with Joe Mixon in that regard. But with the Cowboys, I mean, listen, no one is happier that the Jets are the biggest dumpster fire in the NFL than Jerry Jones and the Cowboys right now.
Frank Isola, you have a takeaway from last night?
And, I mean, the Cowboys, they can't win a home game, and they've been outscored by 118 points. That's hard to do. And they were really good the last 2 years. They didn't play well in the playoffs, but they were having home playoff games. So I don't know what's happened to them. As far as Houston's concerned, if Mixon can run the ball like that, that's going to make Stroud a better quarterback. You know, Stroud was terrific last year, but everybody was ready to put him into Canton. Let's just dial it back a little bit. He still has a lot of growth in front of him. What would concern me about him, especially with his accuracy, if they play a road playoff game, cold weather, that could be a little dicey. But I think he's kind of come back to earth a little bit. He'll be better for it. He needs to start winning games like he did last night. That's a game they have to have.
Justin Sinsley, takeaway from last night.
Look, even with the concerns about the Texans, they're the better team, and they were always going to win. You know why? Because they played the Cowboys at home. And the Cowboys' last 6 home games, this includes last year's, home games. And this includes the last Green Bay and last year's playoff. They've only held the lead for 2 minutes and 15 seconds at home.
Is that right?
They've been outscored by 118 points at home, like Frank said. That's the 3rd most in the Super Bowl era. Because you know why? This franchise has not been committed to winning since 1994. I know that sounds drastic. I know it sounds like I'm overindulging in it. But when Jerry fired Jimmy Johnson in 1994, that told you everything that man needed to know about winning. That told you everything he needed to know about winning. So when you see the pieces of metal fall from the sky, no, that's symbolic because the sky has officially fallen in Dallas. It is bad. It has been rock bottom. They've had great teams over the years and great players, but I don't know where the future lies for this team.
Well, its future is ahead of it. I know we were talking about some really tough teams there. I do appreciate Courtney Cronin putting in the binaural beats, so those thoughts about dumpster failures did not exactly apply to her Chicago Bears just yet. We'll take a break right here. Buy or sell low. The worst record in the NBA right now. Anyone? The Philadelphia 76ers. Yes, Heat 106, Sixers 89 last night. Philly's fourth loss in a row. Bam flat out turned Embiid on one play. Players, coaches meeting post-game kept the locker room closed for an hour. Reporting from Shams Charania here is that Tyrese Maxey, who didn't play because he's hurt but nearing a return, called out Embiid, who did play, despite being doubtful with illness, for being late to everything. More reporting here that players want Coach Nick Nurse to coach harder. An unnamed source calling it all the elephant in the room on elephantine disappointment, and what it tells you that there was this meeting and that it all got out around the horn. George Sedano.
Tony, if you look at their situation, 2-11, okay, 108 teams in NBA history have started 2-11 or worse. Only 8 have made the playoffs. None have won a playoff series. They had to have this meeting already, as crazy as it sounds. And Tyrese Maxey was the one guy with real skin in the game who's been there. I know he's hurt right now, but has been there with Joel Embiid, is actually close with Joel Embiid, and can actually be honest with Joel Embiid.
So that's a dose of honesty. Do you think this will have a positive response from Embiid and the team, George?
Yeah, I do, Tone. I think that they'll still be in that play-in, maybe the playoff area. It's going to be tough to have to climb out of this hole even this early in the season, but I think they'll be able to right the ship once they get
Courtney
home.
Cronin?
Man, I didn't realize that Marcel Louis-Jacques and Pablo Torre had so much in common with Joel Embiid, who's apparently late to all of these things. I kid.
Wow. Oh, my goodness.
I will say, though, that as someone who covers a team that has a lot of meetings between players and coaches and has heard about players telling coaches that they want to be coached harder, it usually doesn't end well. It usually means that someone somewhere down the line very quickly is going to be fired. But this, to me, is beyond what happens, like, in the short term in that meeting. Joel Embiid was just not aggressive last night. It was the first time since the 2017 season that he didn't attempt a free throw. There's something going on with him specifically that seems to be the root of all their issues.
Justin Tinsley?
Look, I saw Courtney's Instagram stories yesterday. She listened to way too much DMX. That was
She's
crazy.
listening right now, I think.
Yeah, right. So I'm not going to call this an implosion yet, Tony, but there will be signs. If you're having players-only, coaches-only meetings before Thanksgiving, there are signs there. And here's the thing. The Sixers are 2-11. They're tied with the Washington Wizards in the basement of the Eastern Conference. Anytime you're tied with the Wizards in basketball right now, that's a bad thing. So can they turn it around? Yes, I believe they have the talent to turn it around, but as George just said, what does turning around even look like for a team that has championship?
You only need to get to the 10th
Yeah,
seed.
but
I'm talking about the politics
for a top 3 seed.
in a locker room. I'm talking about a player calling out another player for being late to everything, Frank Isola.
The star player, the face of the franchise.
And I think good for Tyrese Maxey, because forget about the fact that Embiid is 12 for 37 on the season shooting. Forget the fact that they're 0-3 when he's played in the 3 games. You can't show up on time, and you're supposed to be the guy on the team. You're just moping around the court, showing up late. It's a bad look all the way around. Doesn't want to play, back-to-backs. When your teammates are mad at you about something like that, that speaks volumes. Forget about the fans and the media. That's a teammate that cares. We need Embiid to care that much as well.
Buy or sell 2, college football playoff ranking, edition 3, T-minus 2 hours. Don't expect many changes after a week where everybody won, minus BYU and Tennessee. Something to chew on from Lane Kiffin about jockeying in the SEC.
I've talked to other coaches, so I'll just kind of give you the feeling from some other coaches that, they don't want to be in it. The reward to get a bye versus the risk to get knocked out completely, that's a really big risk.
Courtney, would a 3-loss SEC team be better resumed than some of these other teams? And should playing in the conference championship be a concern for them? Around the horn to you.
Well, it depends on how the conference championship game would go. Of course, the opponent, the way the game plays out, the score. But Lane Kiffin is expressing PTSD that all SEC coaches have from last year, seeing Georgia go in undefeated to the SEC championship game, lose that game, and then they got left out of the 14 college football playoff. Ole Miss has 2 losses right now. If they finish 10-2 and they go into the SEC championship game and lose, they could be on the outside looking in because, A, they have that Kentucky loss, bad loss, on their resume. And on top of that, there's 6 teams right now, Ole Miss included, that are vying for the mix. There's no clinching scenario until week 14. This is what happens when you have a conference with this much talent, with teams that cannibalize each other. And it should be a reward to go play in your conference championship game, but for the reasons I just explained, what Lane Kiffin was saying, it's not.
George, you're not buying it. What are you buying?
Tone, let me tell you this. I'm buying this. It's a master class by Lane Kiffin and Kirby Smart the other day, too, in politicking, okay? Because the committee has shown that if you lose, doesn't matter. They don't like losses. They're going to knock you for losses in this situation. And the SEC is trying to ride off the back of its reputation of being the best conference over the last 10, 15, 20 years, where if you look at last season alone, you can make a clear argument that the now defunct Pac-12 was the best conference in America, not the SEC, who did not have a representative in the championship game last year. So it's a masterclass in politicking, and they're feeling the heat in the SEC.
Justin Tinsley?
You know, this is a case of I don't want to hear from the messenger, but the message makes sense. And I get what he's saying, but boo-hoo. But still, boo-hoo. This is the SEC. These are the blue bloods of college football. They've written off this expectation and reputation that they're the best college football teams in the land. Well, guess what? Go win your conference championship. And guess what happens if you win your conference championship? You get a bye. This is football. Big risks, big rewards, big losses. I don't want to hear, oh, maybe we shouldn't play in our conference championship. No, get out of here.
College football playoffs committee is choosing the 12 best teams, Frank, with a 3-loss SEC team that played in their conference championship but got that 3rd loss there be a better team in your eyes?
I think they would be. Let's face it, they really wanted to call it the SEC Invitational, not really the college football playoff. But remember, it's the NCAA. Nothing is fair. Notre Dame doesn't have a conference championship game. So some teams have to play in one, other schools don't. If Notre Dame can win its last 2 games, they're in the playoffs. So none of it is fair. Lane Kiffin is right, but guess what? Tough luck. Go win your conference championship game if you're in.
You know, Showdown is like our conference championship right here. Somebody's going to get a loss. Sedano and Cronin, you won't even be getting that opportunity, though.
Go listen to some DMX.
Tinsley, Isola, Showdown in 2 minutes.
Bang.
The Toronto two-step.
What does this honor mean to you right now?
This is cool.
Paul Skeens, Rookie of the Year. The race versus Jackson Merrill. Skeens, 23 first-place votes, putting him over the top. Maybe you had a vote on that, or maybe it's Cy Young tomorrow. Skeens again, or Chris Sale, or Zach Wheeler. Skeens says his vote would go to Sale. Justin, you agree?
You know, Skeens has the personality of the 1990s Undertaker, so I'll be his Paul Bearer. No, he deserves to win Cy Young. From the moment he introduced himself to the league in May, he has been the best pitcher. 1.96 ERA, struck out 11.5 batters per 9 innings. He was the guy.
Frank Isola?
I'm selling Sale. I love the fact that Skeens did it he was dominant over a short amount of time. There's nothing wrong with that. He's being gracious. It's like me saying, I want Justin to win. I really, really want him to win.
All right,
I hope
but
he does.
So you both
Come
had
on,
Skeens
Frank.
for Cy Young. All right.
Yeah.
I was fishing there, and I guess you're both catching the Skeens. We'll move on. Split the point. Cavs Celtics tonight. Oh, yeah. 15-0 on the line in Boston. So it's November basketball, but this is a huge, delicious matchup when you think of the win streak. Also, it's the Cup. Frank, does the Cleveland undefeated run end at the Champs' house tonight?
Unfortunately, I think it does. Look at the way Boston treated the Knicks on opening night, where the Knicks said, we should have played you in the conference finals. They got blown out. I'm not saying a blowout tonight, but the Celtics want to put them back in their place.
Justin Tinsley?
I actually have it extending to 16 games. This is a team that is well-rounded.
Wow.
Top 10, top 5 in offensive and defensive ratings. No, and Darius Garland comes back tonight. Excuse me.
Mitchell coming back. Garland has been balling.
Yeah.
I think the Celtics are also top 10 in those metrics you gave. We'll give the point to Isola. Showdown 3, the New York Giants. Yesterday's decision to bench Daniel Jones and start Tommy DeVito. Is that tipping the hand that there's a plan to play for the #1 pick? Also, Jones getting demoted all the way to QB3. Frank, can you make sense of the Giants' plan here?
It doesn't make sense. A lot of the Giant players don't understand. I'm not going to criticize a kid named DeVito, but clearly the Giants, kind of like the Jets, are going to be looking for a quarterback during the offseason.
Justin Tinsley?
Yeah, honestly, Daniel Jones made out like a fat rat in this. I think he's going to have the better future. He can go to another team and possibly turn his career around, whereas the Giants have no plan moving forward.
Frank Isola is going to go to FaceTime and turn this show around.
Wow. It's been a long time. Hey, maybe you heard that the great Bob Love passed away this week at the age of 81. He was a great player in the 60s and 70s. His number 10 is retired by the Chicago Bulls. But it's more than that. He's an inspirational story. This was a guy that grew up with a stutter. After he was, think about how that impacts a young guy. When he was older and he was done playing, he was working at a store in Seattle. The owner of the store helped him get a speech therapist. He became a motivational speaker. Think about when one man's kindness combines with one man's perseverance. That's pretty impressive.
Love that story. Thanks for sharing, Frank.